pretty happy about it. All right, so if you go to here in 129S, here's the projects, and we talked about the first couple here and the first couple of extra credit, the binary games, command injection, and SQL injection, and I just added 2 more. Z-Attack Proxy is a vulnerability scanner for websites, and I had it in the class, and it didn't work very well at all because the network filters it. But I realized today, now we have cloud servers that are outside the network filter. So we can run it from the cloud, and then it will run pretty well. The problem is, though, it's a graphical tool. And if you've been doing these projects here, you made some Google Cloud Linux servers. So the Google Cloud Linux servers, I've got them here, and they're usually command line only. You go here, and I have a Drupal server, which is a Debian Linux server, and I can click this and open an SSH session, but I don't have any graphics. And for this, I need graphics. So I put in the project, which I worked out a few months ago, how you put a graphic environment on a cloud server, which is really very nice. It turns out that the coolest way to do it is Chrome Remote Desktop, which makes the Microsoft Remote Desktop protocol onto Linux through Chrome. One irritation, though, is you cannot use the City College Network to do this. City College Network blocks RDP. They filter a lot around here. So you have to use your home network, your phone, the danger zone network here, or some network that is not filtered, or a VPN through the City College Network, but you can't run it through the naked City College CCSF guest or CCSF student because RDP is filtered. So what I'm doing is I'm using danger zone, which is the same. The name of the network is danger zone and the SSID is danger zone, and it's in this room just for this reason. That puts us on the other side of the firewall, so it's not filtered at all. And now that I've done that, I set up Chrome Remote Desktop. So there are 2 projects that go together here. Chrome Remote Desktop is here, so you get a GUI on your cloud server, and then we use Z-Attack Proxy to do a vuln scan. So to set up Chrome Remote Desktop, all you have to do is execute about 4 commands on the server, which install this thing called Chrome Remote Desktop. Then you need to have a graphical environment. GNOME is the one you have in most Linux distributions, but it's big and heavy. XFCE is a more rudimentary, uglier desktop, but it's smaller to install, so these commands will install that thing. And now you can install Firefox, so you have something visible, a GUI-based tool on there, and now you can connect. So what you do is you have to use the Chrome browser, and then you go to remotedesktop.google.com, and now you can connect to your servers. So if I cancel this one, here's my remote access page, and here's my various servers. These are old servers that have gone away. I used up my free trial. Here's my new one. I click on the server, and then I had to give it a 6-digit PIN. So I put in my 6-digit PIN, which I configured on the server. And now when I connect, it will give me my graphical desktop, which is here. So let me close this. We don't need this right now. And we're going to come back to this. Maybe I'll leave that there because it'll be faster. So now I have a desktop. There's no start button. I have to right click, applications, and here they are. And I have Internet Firefox. So I can open Firefox on here and view websites. And I'm viewing them from the cloud, so I'm outside all filtering. So if I look at Hackathon is what we're going to attack here. I can go to my Hackathon server here from the cloud. This is that imitation Amazon. And of course, this is thoroughly insecure. It makes all sorts of stupid mistakes. So you have to make an account. I made an account earlier. Let me just check it. You'll need to have an account. I think I made it ED290. Sign in. Yeah, good. I might as well save it because there's no security and I'll log out. Okay, so I made an account and I have a server. Now this server has all kinds of features. It's got ways to buy products in a shopping cart and ways to search for products and a contact form and ways to put comments on products and so on. It's got all the features of a modern website. And you could try to find vulnerabilities one by using burp, but what a lot of people do is they use an automated scanner. So after you have a graphical environment in the cloud, which is what this project sets up, you can then use the Z-Attack proxy. You might as well get used to this. Everybody uses these vuln scanners. They are very annoying and not very effective, but they are commonly used. The first problem, which held me back for a while, is you cannot use them from this kind of filter network, because what this is going to do, you install ZAP with a few commands, then you launch ZAP, And now you can just do an automated scan. And you put the URL you want to scan and you hit attack. And it now spends about 10 minutes sending thousands of requests to that server. It first maps every URL on the server, clicks every button to see where it goes, and then it takes every place it can put in data, and it tries putting in like 100 kinds of bad data, apostrophes, long data, data with brackets in it, data with minus signs in it, and comment characters and everything. So it sends every possible attack to it. So if you're at a filtered network, it will freak out. It will see you sending all this obvious attack traffic out, so it will block it or put you on a hate list or turn off your IP address. It will punish you. So doing it from inside a corporate network like this is for the birds. But doing it from the cloud, it actually runs really fast and works. So within 7 minutes, you'll see it start showing a percentage. It's sending thousands of requests. This is the first 300 requests. You see them all going. It's doing a post to add something to the cart, and then again and again and again. Then it's doing something to the contacts page. It's sending hundreds of requests up to the server, trying all these things. And when it's done, it'll take about 7 or 10 minutes, and it will finish. And when it finishes, you'll see what it found. And it rates what it finds by colors. Red is the worst, and there are other colors for medium. So it finds 5 red letter flaws, looks like 6. Cross-site scripting means I was able to inject script tags somewhere on the page which would execute in somebody else's browser. Path traversal means there was a path to an object somewhere in the URL, and I was able to redirect it to a different object. So I could see, read or write to files that were not supposed to be written to. And remote file inclusion is very similar. You refer to a file, and then there's a command injection and 2 SQL injection groups. So of course, it's all full of flaws. And so what you have to do is you have to test them one by one. When you run a Bowne scanner, they take a long time, they're very noisy, and they're very inaccurate. Bowne scanners will frequently miss real vulnerabilities, and they will frequently have false positives. Like I tell you there's a SQL injection, but in fact there isn't. What it means is it sent something to the server, and the response looked bad. But when you actually test it, it may very well turn out that you can't really do any harm with it. This is very common. In principle, there's a response that's unexpected, but in practice, there's no way to actually do any harm with it. So you have to test them manually. And the way you test them is you just go to the one you want to test like this. Here's a cross-site scripting. So you click on this, and over here, it shows you the URL. So you copy the whole URL, and you put it up here, and it will indeed pop up a box. So that's cross-site scripting. This is the standard thing. I have a URL, and the URL has a JavaScript alert, which pops up a box. That is the standard proof of concept. That means I could have done anything. I was able to, in the URL, put code which ran. So that's that one. Then you've got file inclusion. This one here has a redirection. If you look at the end of this page, it has a thing called return URL, which it's moved to Google. So it's outside Hackathon. This is an open redirect. This is a fairly common flaw that you find. It means that I can send a URL to this domain, which actually goes somewhere else. So I could make, if Amazon had this flaw, I could make a URL where the browser thought it was going to Amazon, but it really went to an evil domain and loaded malware. And what will happen is the browser will interpret this as malware on the Amazon site. And it will report it to the antivirus, and they will start getting flagged and blocked and say you have malware on your server, and they don't have malware on their server. What they have is an open redirect that allows me to give the browser the illusion that there's malware on their server. So this is a serious flaw, and it can lead to your site being blacklisted and to your customers getting attacked, but it's also confusing to the developer because they won't find malware on their server. And yet their customers are getting malware by going to the server. So that's the kind of thing. That's the problem. They go to your server, and because of the same origin policy, your browser interprets this as all being Hackathon. Even if you allow content from somewhere else, you're going to get blamed for it. Anyway, I tried explaining this to high schools and didn't get anywhere. They had this vulnerability. So then there's SQL injection. Here's the SQL injection. You click on it, it shows you the details. It's in the login page. And here's the attack: ZAP apostrophe union all select null dash dash. That should look fairly familiar for the SQL injection we talked about last time. The apostrophe is the active ingredient. So this tells you if you go to that URL and you put that junk in the fields and run it, you will then get a big ugly SQL error, showing that there's now a SQL syntax error. So this is a classic SQL injection type where some of the data I put in the username field executed as code. So it's command injection. Anyway, so that's, you practice using a vuln scanner, see how it goes. It's good, clean fun. And after you've found these vulnerabilities and verified them, you could now take over the server. So I put that here as an extra credit project, hack my Amazon. You can totally destroy this thing. It's kind of funny. 2 years ago, somebody replaced all the pictures with dildos. Last time Caitlin put her name on and replaced all the pictures with kittens. You know, you can totally take over this server and change everything. So don't put anything like a good password on this server or anything. And every now and then people, feel free, trash it all you like. I have a backup. When my students are doing their homework correctly, I have to restore it from backup a few times. That's perfectly fine. But you can totally hack that server. But do anything you want. I got an image backup. Okay. If you trash it totally, I'll just restore from backup. Okay. But if you feel free. That's the whole point of these things. They're up there to get hacked. So that's what I wanted to show you. These are extra credit, but they're good things to do. I was happy to put the scanner back in. These scanners are an important part of any penetration test or vulnerability assessment, but you have to understand the limitations. The scanners are sloppy and not very accurate. So you have to go back and manually verify whatever they say. If you just take the output of the scanner and send it to a customer, they will hate you because it won't be true. And the other thing the scanner will never understand is the business. There might be a SQL injection, but it's in a database of something unimportant like library books, and it doesn't matter. And it takes a human to understand that. In principle, there's a flaw. In practice, it's not really going to cost your company any money, so it's not worth wasting your time to fix. That's why they have to pay a human to do a test. So you can exercise intelligence and guide them to success, because everybody has a million flaws and they don't have money to fix them all. What they need, just like your doctor tells you, you know, you should quit smoking, you should quit drinking, you should move to another town, you should quit your job, you should get more exercise. And the guy says, I'm not going to do all that. Give me like one thing. And the companies are the same. There's always 100 things wrong, and that's no use. You need to tell them like the top 3 or something that are really going to hurt them and which ones they can let slide. Anyway, yep. Any more comments out there? Okay. Well, that's all I wanted to show you. Let's see, looks like there's a chat comment coming in. Can you renew your free Google Cloud subscription after the 60 minutes? There is no 60-minute limit on Google Cloud. There is, however, in Genymotion, which we're using in the Android class. And as far as I know, you only get 60 minutes there and you can't get any more. But Google Cloud, you get a year or $300. So there's no 60 minutes. You can totally use Google Cloud machines for quite a long time. And if you want to make a Windows machine, there's a link on the page in Exploit class where you make a Windows machine, where you can get a $50 voucher to pay for Windows machines, because Windows machines are not covered by the normal free trial. But Linux machines are, and you can let them run for months without using up your $300. Linux machines don't use only about $1 a day to run them. They're much cheaper than Windows machines. Any other questions? Yeah.
So the little Linux Unix server that I set up on the cloud,
yeah,
virtual server, I could use that instead of the cloud, or would I be potentially?
I mean, once you make one,
can I run the virtual? What do you call it? The graphical on that?
Yes, you totally can. It's just a normal cloud machine. Once you have a cloud server, you can run it with SSH, or you can execute a few commands and have the cloud option too. Technically, it's using up a little space and a little processing time, but it doesn't matter. It's not enough to matter. You can make another machine.
Could you say that again? I normally go in with SSH.
Yeah, you can, and you can still go in with SSH. You can go in this way or with the graphics. Either way is fine. Okay. Or you could make a separate machine.
And so these instructions I can use to go into mine with the graphics.
Yep. Okay. You can put it all on one machine.
I don't need to deal with Google Cloud.
Well, I'm using Google Cloud. But you could put it on any machine anywhere. You could run it in VMware or something. But in this case, you do need a cloud machine, because when you do the scan, you have to be outside firewalls and filtering. That's why for the ZAP proxy, the cloud machine is very important. If you try to run it from like your home laptop, you'll probably have miserable results. That's why I took it down for a couple of years, because students ran it on campus and it would take hours and fail, and it was driving them all nuts. Yeah. Because if your network is filtering for malicious things, then you totally can't run a scanner through it. So running it from a cloud machine is the best way. That's why a lot of pen testers do this now. They don't attack from their own laptop. That's why they don't use Kali much. They put everything on a cloud server. Then It's got high bandwidth. And then if they catch you and block the IP, it doesn't really matter. You just throw away the server and you're done. You know, this is often the way you do it. Everybody puts their real products on the cloud, and the attackers put their attack tools on the cloud. The cloud is just so awesome. I hardly use virtual machines at all anymore. It's usually just whatever you're doing, it's probably better to just put it in the cloud. It turns out to be much better. And it's very good to get good at using cloud machines and understand the services, know how to sign up, because that's what people really use, is the cloud for everything. So getting used to the cloud and these remote tools is a very good skill to develop. Whereas learning how to run local virtual machines is kind of a waste of your time. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to stop the recording then. I'll leave the share going for a while if anybody online wants to ask questions, but